Elliot, what does mommy do for work?
Yeah.
What does mommy do for work?
Podcast.
That's right. Smarties, hope you enjoyed hearing Elliot's voice. By the time this episode comes out, he's going to be almost 3 years old. Love that he knows that mommy does a podcast for work. In this episode, we discuss the tricky idea of intersession parent involvement in educational therapy intervention for middle school through college learners. We talk about the 3 different levels of parental involvement and how to establish agreements around what the learner and clinician need at each level. We also discuss what can happen when the level of involvement doesn't match what the learner and clinician need at that moment. A lot of this episode, you'll hear us discuss how it's highly individualized based off the learner and the clinician. And this is where working with a skilled educational therapist, a skilled learning specialist can be particularly meaningful in helping you as the parent establish that understanding and figure out what is going to work best for your individual family. Feel free to sign up for a phone call at either one of our websites. My business is Kapp Educational Therapy Group in Beverly Hills, California, and virtually everywhere. And you can sign up for a phone call at www.kappedtherapy.com. And my practice specializes in learners with executive functioning skills challenges, 5th grade through adulthood. Or you can sign up for a phone call with Steph at www.myedtherapist.com. My Ed Therapist is in Redondo Beach, California, and Manhattan Beach, California, and virtually everywhere. And they work with learners of all ages. Let's dig in.
You want to learn faster, but sometimes working harder is just not the answer. You have to learn smarter. The Educational Therapy Podcast.
Hi, Smarties. Welcome to episode 313 of Learn Smarter, the Educational Therapy Podcast. I'm Stephanie Pitts.
And I'm Rachel Kapp.
And today we're talking about what parents can do in between sessions with their learners. This is a hot topic.
Totally.
I understand why.
Okay.
There's a lot of anxiety that parents have, understandably, especially when they're first beginning the process of educational therapy and trying to get the most out of sessions, trying to get the most out of the time that is left in the school year to bring up grades. You know, there's multiple reasons, but those are 2 of the main reasons that I see and I understand. And so that's what sort of sparked this episode, to just sort of have a conversation. And I think this is important to really, like you said in the intro, really talk about where the learner is at.
This seems to be the biggest, most frequently asked question, both from parents and from the team. This is the thing that I talk with my team most about in terms of too much parental involvement, not enough parental involvement, just depending on what's going on with the learner.
It's the Goldilocks and the 3 bears, right? Where's the just right?
Where's the just right? And the truth is that it's our job as the educational therapist, as a learning specialist, to help parents figure it out, because they don't know either. And for sure, the learner doesn't know.
Yeah.
They just know once you have a middle school, high school, or college learner, oftentimes there's annoyance around these conversations. So it's helpful to have that partnership with a highly skilled clinician like you would find at Kapp Ed Therapy Group or at My Ed Therapist, because we always talk about preservation of family and home life, right, Steph? And this is a huge component of it. So the fact that we haven't talked about what parents can do in between sessions in the previous 312 episodes of this podcast is bananas. But let's dig into it, because the truth is it's highly dependent on that learner and that clinician and their dynamic and their relationship and what they're specifically working on in that moment.
Yeah.
So we have divided it up into 3 levels of involvement. And let's just kind of talk about each one. And then we're going to talk about what happens when the parent involvement isn't matching what the learner needs in that particular moment. And it's so tricky to see that and figure it out.
This is a difficult one to navigate. And I think knowing your learner and sort of putting aside your feelings as a parent, and especially if you're the parent that doesn't identify with what the student is struggling with. That is extremely challenging. Your brain, it doesn't necessarily work the same way your child's does. And maybe your partner's or the other parent of the child, that is the identifying parent that understands what's going on and what works best. So this is one of those moments of trying to take a step back and really assess where you're at and what you're feeling and why, and where they're at and what they're feeling and why.
So can I share a quick anecdote?
Yeah.
Elliot's been doing this swim intensive. He's doing like 9 days. And I finally, on day 5, I asked the coach, I'm like, hey, what are we trying to get to by the end of this? Because listen, there's absolutely been progress, but the coach has been trying to get Elliot to like put his head down and touch his chin to his chest. I'm demonstrating for Steph so that when he goes through the water, he's looking down at the floor. I mean, this is all they worked on the last class, okay?
Okay.
And I'm sitting there, and he had prepped us as the parents. He's like, don't get involved. Which, great. I'm actually really fine with that. I'm happy to let the grown-up in charge be the grown-up in charge. But Elliot kept putting his head down, and the second he was brought into the water, his head went up to look at the sky. And every single time he shouted out, I did it. And he was so proud of himself. And I was sitting there with a friend of mine, and I was like, he did not do it. He hasn't even done it once. And I walked away from that class, and I said to Adam, I'm like, I understand why parents yell at their kids at sports now. My expectation is that he should be doing that. And it felt like he wasn't listening. When in reality, maybe he's not ready to do that, or he doesn't have the coordination within his body to keep his head down the whole time, or he doesn't feel secure. There's some reason he's not doing it, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get curious.
Yeah.
But my instinct was to yell at him. And I don't ever yell at him. But my instinct was to be like, Elliot, pay attention, you know? And so we've just now been talking about it for 3 days in between classes. And so I'm like, what does coach tell you to do? And he puts his head down. So he does intellectually get it. But just the fact that at the end of it, he was shouting, I did it. Like, he was so proud of himself. And I'm like, I don't want to take that from him, even though I want to be like, no, you didn't, bro. Like, but there was one time he sort of did it. So I was like, okay, sort of.
Progress, right?
Progress over perfection. But it was just like, I wanted to get involved and like hold his head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, but let's talk about the 3 phases of involvement.
So the first phase is a high level of involvement and accountability for the learner. This is the learner that needs someone overseeing everything. Basically, you're their executive functioning.
They need body doubling.
Yep. They need someone literally standing there, sitting there. They are not initiating getting homework done or doing a task until they've been told or been given some sort of ulterior motivation to get it done.
External.
Yeah, external motivation. Or, you know, they're the ones that don't have follow through and they're just lost, a lot of them. And so they do nothing.
Yep. So when your learner actually needs a high level of accountability from the parent, that's usually in the beginning.
Yeah.
I would say, of intervention.
For sure.
And this is where the opportunity arises. And you're going to hear this at every level of involvement that we talk about, that this is where the partnership with your clinician, with your ed therapist is really, really important, because they can help you set up boundaries around communication. They can tell you what to communicate about. They can tell you how often and what kind of communication. And also this often means that there's a high level of communication between clinician and a therapist and parent. And I also think it's really important from like a business perspective to have a conversation with the parent about, when you write me this big long email, are you cool if I just give you a thumbs up back to show you that I've read it? But I'm not going to respond to each individual component of it because I want to be respectful of your time and my time. And also chances are I probably already know a little bit about this. So that's where you can have those conversations with parents about what that communication between clinician and parent can look like as well.
Yeah. And let's be clear. The high level of accountability doesn't mean that the student wants it.
Oh, yeah.
This is what they need versus what they want. So are they capable of doing anything on their own? If they are not, then yes, they need a high level of accountability. And this is where we'll talk about in a little bit, we'll talk about the parent relationship and whatnot. But that's the first level of accountability. And some of you are probably shaking your head going, yeah, that's my kid. Okay, what's the next level?
The next level is mid-level involvement. See where we're going here, Smarties? But what I will also say is that I sometimes think parents are traumatized, right? They will oftentimes stay in that high level of accountability longer than they need to. And that's where that trusted relationship with the clinician allows them to step back so that they can step forward. And if you're not sure of what sort of involvement you should have, what level of involvement you should be having in the school stuff, this is a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful reminder to have that conversation with the clinician so that they can help guide you to a greater understanding, because they may be further along than what you anticipate. What's involved in the mid-level of involvement, Steph?
The mid-level is asking those 3 questions. So if you go back to episode 303, the 3 questions that we would ask learners are...
The 3 questions are, and we'll link episode 303 in this episode. The 3 questions are, did you fully go through your online portal? And using that language is important because it's not just looking at it. It's going class by class. It's looking at deadlines. It's looking at potential missed assignments. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about fully going through it. The second question is your calendar fully reflective of what's happening and what's happened? And the third question is, what's on your agenda today?
Yeah, that is a very specific way of asking, what do you need to do? When are you going to do it? How are you going to do it?
Yep.
So that's just giving very, very detailed language for that. But those are the 3 questions that you could be asking your learner. Those that are ready to have some accountability. So they have a sense of what homework they need to do, or when they have tests. They might have written in their calendar once during the week, and it could be in session only, right? They're starting to have some accountability. So, and they're also more willing to self-advocate. And that means talk to their teachers, email their teachers, etc. So that is where the mid-level is. And Len, let's talk about the no involvement.
The no involvement parent. We love, not that the parent's not involved. We love when the learner has gotten to the point where it's not necessary. First of all, that means there's trust. The trust has increased between the parent and the learner. The parent could be completely hands-off, and the learner and the clinician have it handled. This is also the time when we're beginning to start thinking about graduating out, depending on other goals. This is also the time where, hey, if there's something that the parent needs to do, they can expect that the clinician will let them know, or better yet, that their learner will let them know. And this is when there's open communication about what's going on with school and home life and what that learner's responsibilities are. And they are following through. They are taking care of it. They are doing it. And things that were hard have gotten easier.
Yeah. And listen, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be slip ups and there's going to be things that fall through the cracks and whatnot. But this is definitely where the parent is not checking the portal. The parent is not asking all the questions every day, all day about what's next, what do you need to do, all of that. So this is where the learner has started to maintain those systems that we've created with them. And this is where we're teaching the fire prevention, if you have listened to episode 37, where we talk about our framework. So let's talk about when the parent is in a different phase than the student, because this is what happens a lot.
Yeah, they kind of miss each other sometimes.
Yeah, and it could be any combination, honestly. It could be that the kid needs involvement and the parents aren't, or vice versa.
Let's say the kid needs a high level of involvement, but the parent's in a place where they don't want to be involved. And that's why they have the ed therapist on the team. That's why they have the clinician on the team. Yes, absolutely. That is a backup. But sometimes there is that higher level of accountability and higher level of involvement that is still needed until you are invited to back off. And that can be really tricky to sort of figure it out, especially if they're bringing in an expert like us, right? They're like, great. Some parents, I don't want to be doing this. I would actually say the majority of parents, they're like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want my relationship with my child to be in this way. And that's where we can see that sort of tension if things aren't getting done.
Yeah.
And then you have the kid who really doesn't need the involvement, but the parent is still in the portal. The parent is still asking all the questions. They're updating their systems independently, but the parent is still asking about it. And that is also tricky to navigate because the kid wants to do it on their own. They are doing it on their own. And it's just re-navigating, redefining that relationship again.
Totally. And for a second, let's talk about the student who needs the high level of accountability. The parent, well, maybe doesn't want to, but is anxious and needs to be doing that high level.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of friction in the home.
Yeah.
And this is where we get calls all the time about how to navigate that. Because if you are listening right now and you know that your student needs it and you are fighting all the time and it's creating a really unhealthy dynamic and hurting your relationship with your child, this is one of those things where you need to outsource.
You need to give us a call.
Yeah, you definitely need to give us a call because here's the thing. Some students are fighting because they want to do it on their own and they think that they are doing it on their own, even though the parent is on the back end doing everything for them. And so, as the parent, if you stopped, everything would fall apart, which sometimes I've fully recommended that the parent stop so that the student can see.
A planned failing forward, if you will.
100%. So it's tricky because at the end of the day, you are still the parent. And we cannot teach you how to be an ed therapist to your own child.
Right. Right.
Even ed therapists are not ed therapists to their own child because it just does not work. So, and helping you sit there and think about where are you as a parent and where is your student? And is it working? Because if there's any fighting or you see trouble with the relationship with your child and it's not what you used to have and it feels heavy, then there needs to be a shift in where everybody is at and a family sit down recalibration and hire an ed therapist or a learning specialist. Rach, what would you add?
Nothing. This is a slippery banana peel of a problem.
It is.
And it can be just like everything else in ed therapy. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. When a learner is coming into ed therapy and they're still living in their parents' home, because remember, we do work with adults as well. It's not just about the learner in session learning something.
Yeah.
It's also our responsibility to help the parents sort of navigate and figure all of this out. So we hope this episode was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and sign up for a phone call. We're always excited to chat with Smarties.
Yeah.
With that,
have a great week, Smarties.
have a great week.